Hey, Scott Jordan and Mark Warner here for Jancast number 141 for Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. March, that means we're getting close to spring, right, Mark?
It's right around the corner.
Yeah.
March is coming on strong.
Yeah.
And then you think about March in years gone by here in the greater Philadelphia area, we've gotten some pretty big snowstorms.
Hey, don't say that. I was going to put my snowblower away, and you were going to put yours together.
Yeah.
That's a long story we won't share with the group, but
That is a long story.
hey, for all you new listeners out there and viewers, thank you very much. After our last show, Jancast number 140 with Jeff Cross, wow, man, it just blew up. We went viral, if you could call it that, in the Janssen industry. Actually, viral has a whole different thing you could go with it, right?
Well,
I hadn't really thought
yeah.
about that. Viral, it went fungi, maybe, right?
Oh, God. What, the Last of Us?
I haven't gotten into the yet. Should I watch that?
Yeah. There's people that love it and people that are Luke.
Okay.
So
Is it up there with some of our other favorites, like the other zombie germ-related movies? Trying to think of which ones
Contagion and
Contagion, yeah.
yeah, it's not of that level of acting talent.
Oh, okay.
But what everybody that really loves it are people that have been engaged with the game.
Oh,
So it's a
okay.
game that's all about that, and it does apparently follow that closely. I didn't do the game, but I know a lot of people that were
Wow,
really into that, and it does follow that. So
cool.
that's kind of interesting. I think other things that have been out there, like Contagion and The Hot Zone and
Yeah,
Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman and Rene Russo. I think those are still like the more
yeah,
classic.
yeah. Well, sorry, we got off on a tangent there. We were talking about going viral, and we took it in a different direction. But thank you, Jeff, for boosting, as we call it, boost, like experience boost. We got a great boost from Jeff. Our viewership went up. Not only on the show that he participated in, but 2 or 3 previous to that. So we hope there's a good trend going on. But we talked about some good stuff on that show, and we wanted to discuss a little bit something we just only had a little bit of time to discuss. But Mark, something you were intimately involved with.
Yeah, and Jeff, I'm really grateful for the help that Jeff provided. So over the course of the last really year and a half, I've been engaged in a project to develop a white paper that would build a standard around things that we commonly refer to as a custodial closet. And the problem, of course, that has existed is that architects take it verbatim and think it needs to be a closet. And it's really not. It's so much more than that. So we've tried to redefine the term to a cleaning provision area and create some requirements of what would make a really good cleaning provision area.
Like a sink.
Like a drop sink, but even enough room to store an auto scrubber. I've been in a lot of schools where architecturally they built a custodial closet based on a percentage of the overall square footage, which left the custodial closet too small to park an auto scrubber in. So you walk down the hallway and there's an auto scrubber sitting in the hallway with a charging cord coming out of the closet into it. And that's just silly, right? So a cleaning provision area ought to have a slop sink. It ought to have enough room to store the equipment that's in play, along with some standardization as to how things are organized. You know, one of the big issues that I've run into over the years, Scott, and you've seen this yourself, is, you walk into a hallway and it reeks like mildew and everybody's like, I don't know where it's coming from. And it's like, I have a pretty good idea, and you go down, you open up the custodial closet and there's like mildew mops because they weren't allowed to dry out. A lot of moisture that's not allowed to vent out. So the whole white paper on cleaning provision areas was to rename custodial closets and to provide guidance to the entire industry, and not just the cleaning industry, but architects and building planners, as to what really it would take to do that properly. And there's a requirement for ventilation, so the moisture that's in there can dry out. And the whole danger is if you don't care for the back of the house. In the cleaning industry, the custodial closet's the back of the house, just like in a restaurant, the kitchen is the back of the house, right? So if if the back of the house isn't pristine, you're actually in a position where, in the process of what you think you're cleaning, you're actually contaminating everything. So a really filthy custodial closet can be a petri dish, where all kinds of viral, bacteriological, pathogenic microorganisms, fungi can multiply. And then it heads back out. I mean, that equipment goes all over a facility. But I can't tell you how many times I've said to people, you really should drink those auto scrubber tanks and open the lid so it dries out.
Right.
You know what it smells like in the morning? And people go, oh, yeah, I know what it smells like in the morning. You don't want that, because as soon as you turn it on, it's blowing that into the air. And so anyway, the whole article was about, and then we'll put a link for both the article and the white paper itself, in fact. But within the body of the article was a live interview that Jeff did with me at the ISSA show in Chicago, which was kind of an overview on that. And I think, again, I'm so very grateful that Jeff kind of provided a medium to put that out pretty mainstream, and gotten a lot of requests come back since the Jancast airing, which I'm not solely attributing to Jancast, maybe 90%. But the fact that people have linked into that and kind of made requests, like, where can we get our hands on that white paper? We'd like to incorporate it into our, whether it's a new construction standard or a building refurbishment standard that they want to meet, because it's got a lot of things documented in it. I had a lot of folks actually reach out from the IICRC, people that are involved with restoration, and said, you can't believe what we've seen in custodial closets. Where they'll go in to do a refurbishment, tear down the walls, and find it loaded with mold or mildew and things like that. Again, it's a wet environment, right? Slop sink, wet mops, liquid in buckets. Idea is that can't be allowed. Otherwise, it truly becomes the source of contaminant rather than the source of clean. So it made for a really good article. It makes for a really good discussion. And the more interesting thing, Scott, is all the horror stories that people share. You never believe this,
I'm surprised it's taken this long that it's even been addressed. This has been an ongoing problem. The typical janitor closet, I remember, I don't want to say how old I am, but the typical janitor closet usually is where the main water lines coming into the building, and they seem to jam something, kind of what they think is a janitorial closet, connected with that big pipe and the huge valve to turn the water off for the whole facility. And it's like, oh yeah, there you go. There's water access there. So it seems like it'd be a common sense thing that they would have developed 20 years ago. You need so many of these. Isn't there a requirement, like how many square feet of the building or how many floors there are?
There's a golden rule that architects use, but it's an epic fail. The problem is based on a percentage of square footage doesn't mean that you've allocated enough space for the equipment that's needed to clean it. And it reminds me of something my dad said to me a long time ago, like, thanks, Dad. But it was, if you can't afford to take care of it, you can't afford it.
That's a good one.
Right. And so when you're talking about building a building, everybody's always trying to squeeze all the most efficiencies that they can, the most usable square footage. And what tends to suffer is allocation of space towards what's required to maintain the building. And that's a flawed concept. If you're going to build a multi-million-dollar building, the last thing you want to do is skimp on areas that are required to properly care for the building. Because if you can't care for it, if you can't afford to care for it, you can't afford the building. So, that's like kind of the whole crux of the matter is we need to be able to care for these things. And the other side of it, Scott, is studies have shown that it takes 40 times more time, money, and effort to care for an older building than a new building.
Wow.
40.
Wow.
So, you think about it, a brand new building, you can walk around with feather duster, you're looking good, getting attaboys. But, you deal with some antique building that's been around 100 years, like a lot of government buildings are. And there's a lot of time, money, and effort that goes in to turn for those marble and the brass and, and all the ornate things that were built into those government buildings 100 years ago.
Yeah. They built it in not even knowing how they're going to maintain that stuff either. It just looked good, right?
Yeah, well, and it really was the start of the problem where those buildings they had a closet, you could hang your coat in there, but you couldn't put a mop bucket in there, And so this need has definitely been around a long time, as you said, and having the ability to research it to find out if there were standards, which there weren't. There were, and that was kind of the thing that Todd Stoneking of the University of Utah and Stan Hewlin of Future Floor Technologies were both involved with this. They spearheaded it and asked for my help, and I was very happy to contribute. But the early days were trying to research what standards exist. Let's at least cull through that research and figure out, what's valid. And it was almost non-existent. There were references, like little references, and ISSA's Cleaning Management Institute textbooks, and a lot of that had to do with general standards, like how you store certain things, set up a corporate set. But the overall, what is the dimensions? What should they look like? What's the required ventilation? What's the required lighting? What's the required open floor area needed? How much shelving is required? All of that didn't exist. So it was very cool to go through that exercise. And Todd Stoneking, again, he was involved, works for University of Utah. They were in the process of doing some new construction and some refurb. And he was the one that really was the catalyst to do this whole program because he was really upset that they weren't allocating any space. And he was looking for some valid documentation to prove his point, like this is what's needed. And so anyway, everybody's kind of embraced that, Scott, and it's also been circulated to the IICRC standards committees, the S400 cleaning standard committee. So they've embraced it. I've gotten feedback from the infection control for the commercial built environment standards committee. I sit on both those committees, and they want to embrace this and kind of drive it. And at the end of this week, Scott, there's a gigantic annual standards summit coming up.
I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah, that's in Las Vegas. And every standard that IICRC has been involved with, they're all ANSI standards. And that's the division that Millie Washington oversees. And Millie was a previous guest on Jancast. But, this is one of the topics of discussion for this entire summit. And there's hundreds of people that are flying into Las Vegas for that and hundreds of others that are tapping in virtually to be able to be part of that. I've been asked to present on the last day of it and talk about, how some of these standards interact with one another and try to create some commonality. And, this whole topic of custodial closets is one of those things that's common to many different things, whether it's restoration industry, cleaning in-house service providers, even building service contractors have to give it some consideration because they're often given space to store their gear. So, I was shocked at the impact, but pretty cool. And we'll be able to report on how the IICRC Standards Summit embraced a concept that, yes, you heard here first on Jancast.com. And then who knows, Scott, maybe it'll be a big part of National Cleaning Week.
Yep, which is coming up not until the end of next month. So we got a ways to go on that. We'll probably touch base on that a little bit more in our next show. But other hot news is after we reported about the hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars in fines that the EPA threw down for those people that were selling disinfectant products that we called out, some of them that were making claims. Now this was on the chemical part of it. The EPA just issued a new compliance advisory about the pesticide devices, as they're called, which would include a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, so they're looking at. It's good to see they're out there enforcing or potentially getting ready to enforce other things aside from just the chemicals. But people are making false claims about the equipment as to what it does and what it doesn't do.
And we really should define that term, pesticide devices, for our audience. You know, all disinfectants are designed to kill bugs.
Yeah.
They're microscopic bugs, but by law, the mere fact that they are designed to kill bacteria puts them in the same category as pesticides that are used to kill ants and roaches and spiders, right? So the EPA refers to whether it's a pressurized sprayer or trigger sprayer, electrostatic sprayer, or any sprayers, they'll refer to those units as a pesticide device, even though many of us in the cleaning industry wouldn't think of it under those terms. It's more of a disinfectant applicator.
Yeah.
But that is the terminology EPA uses. And you're right, there was some massive fines. The largest fine ever levied by the EPA, we reported on that. That's $2.7 million. And it was a firm in New Jersey. So
cool. Well, so what else is going on out there? I know there's a tidbit of information, the Transit Authority. You got any info on that, Mark?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you would bring that topic up. So you know, it was actually national news, which is fascinating. Philadelphia's transit lines, national news. Wow, what did they do? Do they have monorails? Is it like they learned how to beam me up, Scotty? No, it was national news because of the horrific nature of cleaning it. And they interviewed a lot of the people involved with the cleaning teams and saying, you know, just what's that like? And Scott, I imagine that it's a lot different than cleaning like the exam room at Johns Hopkins, right?
Yeah, well, we have some previous experience with this in New York City Transit back maybe 25 years ago. Had a major problem in the stairways going down into the subways and on the buses themselves, because the buses don't have bathrooms on them. And the big problem was the drivers. I'm going to say something that's not pleasant, so if you don't want to hear it, mute this right now. But the drivers were going to the back of the bus and using the back of the bus as their urinal. So we you know, the Eric's line's been known for.
Note to self: never sit in the back seat of a bus.
Yes, true. So you know, back in the day, Eric 66, we sold hundreds and hundreds of cases to the New York City Transit because they had the same problem that sounds like Philadelphia now sees themselves having, and it was, you know, unbelievable how much business we did until it, you know, got out on bid, and then it ended up just being, you know, diluted back to hit some super low price point. So I guess they're finding the same thing probably in the Philadelphia Transit.
Well, what's really interesting, kind of doing a kind of step back on it. We talk about training all the time, and we talk about, you know, one of the things that's really critically important is knowing what standard you're trying to meet before you do training and you try to, you know, staff your team. And standards can vary. You know, the standard in the OR room of a hospital might be clean to a microscopic level, where the definition of clean for a mass transit might be, hey, we just like the stations not to smell like urine and fecal matter, you know? So
forget about the germs.
Yeah, right. Just don't let it smell so bad. So you know, a lot of times in the past, people have tried to address that with purely just an odor counteractant, and then realizing that unless you're going after somewhat of the source, it's very difficult to eliminate it out of the environment completely. So that kind of spurred up the advent of the use of bacteriological and bioenzymatic cleaners that would have the ability to go down into the concrete and kind of go after the source of these odors. And then the odors would get into the air. But the interesting thing about odors that we now know is that although an airborne bacteria, it's called putrefactive bacteria, odor causing bacteria. If it's present in an environment, it lends you to believe that somebody doesn't know how to kill airborne bacteria.
Yeah.
And if it's not killing odor causing airborne bacteria, what would ever lead you to believe that they're successful at killing pathogenic or disease causing airborne bacteria, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the presence of the odor is almost a signal that there's potentially a presence of disease. And Scott, there's been like some crazy studies done on this, right?
Well, yes, this is to end the show on a high note, because I know you and I have been thinking about this and finally we got the answer based on some good test data. So here you go. So apparently this is from Australia. There was a nurse that wanted to know whether or not she was contaminating the operating theater, as they call it, because this particular nurse passed wind, if you want to call it that, if we know what we're talking
Actually,
about.
the medical term is fecal bloom.
So passing wind or gas. So a doctor did a fairly basic test. Now, I have no idea how this test was actually figured out, but there was the test got down to two different studies. One was people farting with clothes on and people farting without clothes on. So imagine there's petri dishes involved, and passing of gas, both clothed and unclothed. So imagine that test protocol, right? Oh, no, wait a second. You can't come in here. You have pants on. No, this is the no pants test area. So the good news, though, after extensive testing and reviewing the petri dishes and everything else that are quoted here, the next morning, the petri dish that had received flatulence from an uncovered blank had sprouted visible lumps of two types of bacteria, usually associated. They're usually found only in the gut and on the skin. Meanwhile, the test that involved clothes, no issues. So the good news is, if you're on that bus that we were just talking about, the transit bus, as long as everybody has clothes on, I think we're okay. So I know I was concerned about it, and I know you were.
There's now a new product on the market. It's the HEPA underwear.
That right up there with the sourdough bread mask that we
there you go
on our germ washing. And if you haven't seen that, we'll put a link for that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think we can top any more info on this Jancast. This is like, we're going over the top. We got the experience boost from
Jeff talk
Cross,
about going viral.
And we got statistical data here as to whether or not farts are dangerous or not. This is your source for all things clean. That's all I got to say.
Well, there you go. That was a great way to wrap it all together in a bundle.
So there you go, folks. I'm sure people are going to ponder this one. And man, if the last show went viral, if this one doesn't, I don't know. I don't know what else we have to do. But on that note, because we're running a little long, thank you very much, Mark, for taking the time. Thank you, all the listeners and viewers out there. Thank you. And stay tuned for our next Jancast coming up.
Thank you all.
Yep. See ya.